Hey everybody, it is SeKo Starcraft bringing you some pro replays. We've got a best of 3 series between JackO and Snute. Very long games. I did peruse through this one ahead of time just to make sure it wasn't one of those nobody touches each other for a half hour and then they finally attack each other. This is a very interesting game. I do like watching Snute, particularly against protoss. He's got a very good methodical approach to how he plays the matchup. We'll see what JackO brings to the table here. Looking like he's going to go for probably a Forge expand. I couldn't imagine that he'd be going for a Gateway expand in this kind of setting. But we're going to be seeing what Snute is going to be opening up with here. It's a bit of a longer game, so I'm going to speed it up slightly at the beginning just because sometimes the beginning in PvZ is either filled with cheese or filled with macro. Paying a little bit more attention to Team Liquid recently. I was watching some GSL, I don't know if it was the GSTL, but it's the Team League version of it. And Team Liquid was not in there this year, but they managed to put Liquid Hero. He's kind of mercenarying himself out as a part of, I think it was Team IM. Exciting. This was a game that I thought would be really interesting to go through just because it's a little bit longer, and it really helps me understand a bit more of the dynamics of just what is the strongest race right now in Starcraft. Because I was listening to a lot of discussions, a lot of people are very happy to say that, well, no, right now it's clearly going to be Protoss that's the strongest one right now, and then the next week it's obviously Terran that's the strongest one right now. But it's very seldom you hear people say, wow, Zerg is just the unbeatable race. But with Snute, what I'm interested to see, particularly with late game, is how they're going to be able to deal with generally what is, I think, a lot of people could consider to be one of the weakest races right now. I know there's somebody out there who just gets rocked by Zerg on ladder all the time that disagrees with me, but that's my feelings on it. Gonna take full gases here, no fancy 2-1 each kind of setup. Got himself pretty comfortable wall off, gonna start his economy going. And back at home, we've got no sign of any gas here from Snute. Not even moving any creep tumors right now. Just focusing everything he can on macro. Nothing but injects and drones. I don't think he's even got any extra queens out. I would expect him to make at least one for the other hatchery here pretty soon. And as a Zerg player, what's really interesting is that, yeah, Snute came in, he scouted the timings of this Nexus, but there's still a lot of really strong 2-base all-ins from Protoss can do, throw down another 4 or 5 gateways, maybe go for blink, maybe go for some sort of, robo, go for a warp prism drop, sentry the ramp, and then all of a sudden you just get people that are really trapped. Queen actually came out of the main. This queen moved down here. So as a Zerg player, such in this position, we see the gas finally being taken now, is you have to kind of decide, when am I going to start making attacking units? And how greedy can I be? Because ultimately, as a Zerg player, you would want to sit and drone all day until the last possible moment, just to make sure you get that really huge lead. As a Protoss player, you can decide, maybe I'm going to cut probes at 40 or 50, and then turn into a really strong 2-base attack, and that if you just catch the Zerg player unaware, you just destroy him. Bit of a supply block there for JackO. It's going to take another second or two, and we'll slice the hell out of one Zergling. So we're going to see how Snute's going to make himself aware when the attack is coming. He's doing nothing but droning up huge. He is taking his gases now, but we haven't seen a roach worn down. We haven't seen, there's his lair attack. It's actually at its natural. We are going to see a warp prism play here and a bunch of gateways. Snute, let's see if he gets a chance to see anything with this. Saw a box. Let's see if he looks at that box. It just showed up on the minimap, but he wasn't paying attention to it when it happened. Oh, he sees the Robo Bay there. And you see he cancelled his Spore Crawler. This is just that kind of timing where maybe an Oracle would be attacking or something like that. So that's why he was going with those Spore Crawlers. He cancelled them out now, and is throwing down a Roach Warren. Sees that it's going to be either, Immortal timing or likely some sort of Warp Prism play. Now on this side, lots of gateways down, Twilight Council. See if he wants to get some sort of blinker that's just going to help him get to this next level of tech. Maybe a Templar Archives, maybe just keeping his upgrades moving. Lots of Zerglings out on the map. And see, there was that little bit of scouting that Snute was able to do that told him now's the time to build attacking units. Hydra Den going on the way, Roach Drone almost finished, lots of Zerglings. Speed will be a little bit off being done. There's a good place for that Warp Prism. We'll bring in a handful of Zealots, and we'll see what kind of damage they get. Tons and tons of Zerglings out right now. +1 is not quite finished for the Protoss player. Now, +1 is so important. Actually gives themselves 2 sentries here. Bunch of Lings inside the main. That was a very crappy force field. Nice targeting here. Picks up both the sentries just to make sure that he doesn't get trapped out. Almost lost the Queen, but it's alright. Warp Prism leaves. What did he actually get killed? Only 2 workers got killed in that entire assault. I think this is something that people are getting a little bit better at StarCraft could probably do, is using these overlords to move creep, particularly if you don't have creep tumors in your base. If you're going up against this kind of style, you might as well make it as easy as possible on yourself. Quick little pause. Looks like the game actually crashed, but it should be alright. Immortals cut through rocks pretty darn quickly. So it looks like he's just going to move into a 3rd base after this, which I think is a pretty smart play. Units-wise, 60 drones. Getting out more Hydras here. Sometimes after one of those attacks, he didn't kill the Warp Prism, I'm pretty sure. Where is it? Oh, he trapped it up here in the corner. Fantastic. Well, Snute can't just sit there forever, so eventually he's going to have to move out of the way of that. Another nice thing you can do, if you got a bunch of Lings on the map, run them around all over the place. Check for any proxy pylons. Check for a greedy 3rd. Well, he's pooping on the 3rd. Rocks are down. Mothership core scouting to make sure the rocks don't get shot down. So many Lings. This is... Ugh. I was about to say, this is a kind of a waste. Those have been better off as drones or put into tech. Very unfortunate thing here for JackO is he did try to go for this DT, but now that it got completely scouted, he'd have, you know, the spore crawlers being made at the different bases, making himself overseers. So those Lings, even though they didn't get anything accomplished, saw the Dark Templar attack, and now Snute's going to be able to prepare for it. His creep is pretty delayed, and the other interesting thing I've noticed while watching Snute is in some of his games, as he takes care of another drop quite handily, is he gets his upgrades fairly late. His opponent's already almost on +2 attack, and he's just finishing up his Evo Chambers now. And I think a part of this is him playing a very reactive style, waiting to see what kind of mix his opponent's going to go, and then making a decision of how he wants to attack it. We see that it is going to be ranged attack, so Roaches, Hydras, and then, who knows, perhaps even a little bit of them there, Swarmhosts. Snute has some pretty solid Swarmhost play. Huge supply lead he's got right now as the Protoss player is teching up. First Colossuses are on the way. You'd think the Hydras might have been coming here to put a little bit of damage on, but if the Colossus are out in some good force fields, you can lose those Hydras, and they're pretty expensive in the grand scheme of things. 22 workers. Few static defenses around. Just, you don't want to, when you're in this kind of stage, get something really silly happen to you, like just a couple of DTs ruin your entire day or something like that. Like this little bit of pressure, those Zerglings, yeah, roasted. +3 attack on the way, 1-1, just a little bit over halfway done now for the Zerg player, but he's essentially contained JackO, who's got to watch out not to lose his Colossus. He's going for a bit of a wander. And just really, really good Overlord placement to the north. The south, he's still quite vulnerable in. Trying to sneak down and get that Warp Prism, but that won't be the case. So he's still going to get up some of these static defenses. More Queens, because now it's his, now he's ready to engage. He's got his drone count, he's got his creep spread in the right spot. Now he's just going to go out there and really push for this kind of late game slow crawl that I've seen him do so effectively. This is a pretty good timing for JackO right now. He might be able to get there just before all of these swarm hosts pop out. And during Locust should be timed to be effective as soon as it happens. Same with 1-1. So the timings are pretty good for the Zerg player who's now maxing out. And now it's time for the Great Wall of Snute. Lots of Hydras. 2-2 started immediately. +3 is about to finish up. This is a pretty good timing right now for the Protoss player to hit at. It's kind of at his peak. Well, he's not maxed out, so it's not his entire peak. He's got a good mix. He's got enough energy to get a recall in. And he's got himself a handful of Colossus with +3 about to finish up. The difficult thing for him is the longer he waits, these static defenses will get in place and slow him down enough for the rest of these swarm hosts to get into position here. He's killing his own rocks just so he has an evacuation point here. Sometimes it's very easy to get trapped. Nice little split up of the units. What he doesn't want to do is get this whole army crushed and sandwiched by a bunch of colossus there with +3 attack. More swarm hosts on the way, more static defenses. It's a bit of a funky spot in here. This is a fairly weak moment for the Zerg player. Hydras are coming around. Snipes down 2 of the colossus. The Vipers coming out are very effective, but he's getting kind of sandwiched here behind all these swarm hosts. Good force field. Should have let him escape if he wants to. I don't know if he's going to want to push into this still. Just keep the queens alive. And he's kept himself essentially maxed out this entire time. Do we see... Yeah, the Templar Archives is down. Storm is nice, but a lot of that's going to be to try to deal with the feedbacks that you're going to get out of any of the Vipers. Once the Colossus are killed, Hydras obviously have the DPS you need to probably punch through a few of these units. I hear something. There it is. Like, I'm sure I hear something. Swarmhost, just in case. So the Protoss player is going to go home. Does he have a second robo underway? Figured I'd start seeing him double making those Colossus. Did he forget Thermal Lance, I think? I don't remember seeing that being made. No Thermal Lance. Now that's kind of a big deal when he's going up against Swarmhost play. Storm will be finished and he's working his armor. But now we see that Snute's even going to be taking a lead here pretty soon on upgrades. His 3-3 is on the way here pretty quick, where it's only 3-0, soon to be 3-1 for the Protoss player. So this kind of delayed upgrade style has actually worked out for him very well. Continuing... Oh, Double Spire. Do you like Double Spire? Continuing to make the Great Wall and replenishing it with more drones. This is a worker count add anyways. Bouncing somewhere between 80 and 100, depending on how many static defenses. He doesn't have that super sick bank yet, but he really just wants to make sure he doesn't get overrun by a Protoss player that is almost maxed out himself. And he'll finally start expanding for another base. Like the creep spread. Not as much on the south right now. But I don't think it's going to cost him as much. Spine crawlers are so much fun. Just a mineral sink. I mean, it's the gas that are really important for most late game players. And this is just so cool with being a late game Protoss. Late game Protoss love those war pins of mass zealots, those run-bys that can do huge damage, but you have this big wall of static defenses up. Sometimes you can deal with it fairly effectively. Looks like the warp prism got shut down. Yeah, we got 1 kill on one of those spore crawlers. So that's a lot of spore crawlers. How about the south? Nothing in the south yet. Once again, there's those zealot run-bys. And it's not really as effective for the Protoss to do that right now. Where's his... Doesn't have a pylon down here. He doesn't have that big of a mineral bank to just throw away, 1,000 minerals on a bunch of warpins and zealots. It did pull all of the army out of the way here, so he's going to poke in, try to get some damage done. Lots of detection still in the army here, just to make sure any of those DTs don't get too much damage in. Great feedbacks on all the Vipers there. Very nice play. Otherwise, he probably would have lost at least a handful of those Colossus. Kill the Archon. Kill the Archon. Nope. Also, you can feed off of all of your static defenses. Stargate underway. This is a very natural late game transition for Protoss, just to get those Tempests outrange a lot of the Zerg units. You don't really want to sit there and tangle with Swarmhost Locusts if you don't need to. Another 13 drones, another 7 Spore Crawlers, covering the entire north face. Even getting his Carapace right now for his flyers as well as the attack. When you've got that bank that Snute has, you might as well get every type of tech available. Who needs Thermal Lance? That's pretty funny. I guess he figured it out finally. So it's a pretty good death ball for JackO, but what do you really do about this? And this lends back to that conversation I opened up with, is if Zerg is maybe one of the weaker races, this is one of the most difficult things to deal with. I've seen some very top-level Korean Zerg players do a very similar thing. You just build these giant static defense walls, slowly crawl the map, But what I would think that would be more effective for JackO to do right now, these run-bys are nice, but start taking more bases just to be able to get your bank up so you can transition into, you know, another type of unit comp. Trying to poke in, get a little bit of damage done. Looks like he almost lost a hatch there, but not quite. Wow, Spore Crawler killed that off. A couple of blinding clouds go down. This helps things stay in check. Creep spreads rocking and rolling to the south. You see a good mineral bank starting up here for the Protoss player, but not the gas required for the kind of units he wants to get into. If he does want to go into the Tempests, such an expensive gas unit. So it's kind of funky. I mean, you really can't deal with this very well head-on. At least not super cost-effectively. Like, he's grinding it down, but he's lost 40 supply worth of units just getting grinded down further and further. And we just see Snute recycling his bank into more drones, into more static defenses, so that he's just completely invulnerable to more run-bys. South still somewhat weak, but once again, it's pretty expensive to try to just run down there with, you know, 1,000 minerals worth of zealots, just have them get killed off. Owning the entire northern side of the map. If he can get over into this position here, he should be able to get those swarmhosts in a great position to either attack this fourth, or at least where the army's kind of camping right now. Another Warp Prism underway, 3 Tempests at a time. An Oracle. Oracles are great, give you a little bit of extra vision, also be able to cast the Envision spell, just to be able to see where all of these Zerg units are. If you can get a great Envision on the Swarm Hosts, you might be able to know where it can bounce between different armies or not. He's going to come down here and try and take a 5th base. Snute should understand that this is what's happening here. Just actually, he's got enough Swarm Hosts now where he can actually spread them out. Generally, you don't want to do that just because you get overrun so easily. That's quite a number. 16, just to the south. He's splitting them up in 2 different directions just because of this little peninsula in the middle. It's kind of hard to attack into. Couple of good snags there, but it doesn't look like he's actually going to be able to kill too many units out of it. Only gets 1. Vipers are pretty fragile units, so you're going up against a pretty 85 versus massive. I keep forgetting that Tempest essentially just kill all. Those Zealots didn't really have a great chance to the north anyways. This base is essentially going to be shut down, and if Snute can do the same thing to the south, he's just going to starve JackO out of this game. You see JackO can't really get his supply up fast enough here. He's got the minerals in place. He's got a bit of a bank, but he doesn't really have that maxed out army. Throw down a few cannons there. It's almost useless. There hasn't been a lot of like Zergling run-bys by Snute here. It's just been massive armies that just kill everything. So I don't know if the cannon's going to do him a lot of good. So yeah. That's a pretty good question. If people know, what do you think would be the best way to deal with this, knowing that their static defense is all over the place? Be interesting to hear the different kind of ways people think that this can be dealt with. These little pokes and prods, I believe, are effective, killing the creep tumors, trying to get a little bit of damage into some of the static defenses. It's just been so tough for him to try to control this massive, massive bank, and it's a lot of free units they're casting away. And it's very interesting to see that there's no, not Swarmhost, there is no infestors here out of the Zerg player to lock things in place. More inclined to just use the Vipers to try to pull down these really expensive units. And obviously Storms don't really do anything against buildings. What the hell? I wonder if he threw those away on purpose. He is making 26 Corruptors at a time. How much larvae does he have banked? Oh, he just blew all of his larvae on that, essentially. More Tempest upgrades being done. Trying to keep that creep in check. Once all these Corruptors are out, it's kind of going to spell, I'm not going to say the doom of the Protoss player here, but once he's going to get some of these Tempests taken down by the Corruptors and the Vipers, 3-3 for attack air for Zerg. Such a rare thing to see. It's not that far off being done. There's a lot of Tempests there. Getting their damage in. That Queen got sent just straight to hell on that one. Envision casted on these units. He should be able to see where the Corruptors are at now. Lots and lots of Corruptors. Now, obviously, he doesn't want to just lose those cheaply, but he can afford a little bit better to remake those. Protoss player is getting closer to maxed out now, but he just doesn't have like a meat shield for these Locusts. Right? He's got Tempests and Colossus, and not really that much on the ground right now that's just going to block the damage. Zealots aren't necessarily the best choice. Maybe some Archons or something like that. Bit of a tipping point here. I think the game is going to be pretty close to wrapping up. That one Queen got sent to her doom by the Locusts. That's always funny when that happens. Oh, it looks like we did manage to get a drop into here. This is the Hive, so that would be pretty good to kill. These are not going to be able to do very much about that. This little bit of distraction, I think, is the really important thing that Protosses have to do in this point, is just chip away from behind. Maybe break a hole, just so that way... that's a little unfortunate to lose. Actually, some Zerglings out now. Just so that way you're going to throw your opponent's defense a bit off, but we see Snute so patient, so in charge here. He's not worried. Look at all those static defenses. What's our structure count here? 33 spine crawlers and 69 spore crawlers. Grabs a Colossus, almost a Tempest. +3 flyer weapons on the way. Once again, like, all the ground shields just destroyed now. There's not even that much stuff that the Locusts can shoot at the moment. There's just a handful of Stalkers and some High Templars down here. Good storms. Hit quite a bit of units there. But I think Snute's just going to commit to this. Yeah, I don't think that even with great storms, he's going to be able to stop that. Funky game. I don't want to cast a ton of these because these are super, super long, just trench warfare games. But it's an interesting discussion point as to what do you do as the Protoss player to really counteract that. And I think JackO played well. I think this is just the ideal like late game Zerg setup here. It's so difficult to deal with. Not even denying bases. There has been no base denial this entire time by Snute. Just simply overpowering the entire time. Great game though. So game 1 is going to go to Snute. Game 2 should be coming at you guys right away.